Nerdcast assemble!
Stay dandy, baby. In the world of fiction, sci-fi space operas are big, epic, and at times, surprisingly hilarious. On one end of the spectrum you have Star Wars, and on the other you have Spaceballs. Some of my favorite examples include Men in Black or The Fifth Element. And sometimes the genre can just go into a perfect mixture of both a great sci-fi story and comedy in and of itself. Sometimes these sci-fi comedies can be a love letter and take inspiration from classics like Galaxy Quest, which seems to lampoon Star Trek and its entire fan base. And then there are those that are absolute perfection. In fact, one of my favorite anime series of all time is none other than Space Dandy, a show which is actually from the creator of Cowboy Bebop, one of the most renowned sci-fi anime series of all time. And it did it all with amazing production value, really sharp writing, and of course, it was just funny as all hell. And that pretty much brings us to today's video, my next big Patreon review, which is brought to you by Brandon Sabin. And Brandon really just went into frickin' hyperdrive with this one because he sent me the entire collection of the show that we're going to be talking about today. That's right, it's the early 90s classic, the irresponsible Captain Tylor. But before we begin this review, my friends, I would just like to ask all of you, if you are liking my content, my videos, my video reviews and discussions, maybe think about subscribing to the channel. And also, if you're liking this stuff, make sure to do that whole YouTube algorithm thing and smash that like button. Helps out these videos a lot, ensures more people can see my content when I actually release it. And seeing as how this is a Patreon review, I would like to invite all of you to become members of my Patreon. Become a patron of Ace Guru and help this channel thrive and survive. Make a monthly donation. Remember, first-time donators, I will review an anime series of your choosing. But let's go ahead and blast off into the stratosphere of the irresponsible Captain Tylor. Before I begin the review, I just want to say that Brandon just went nuts in sending me all of this amazing material. He sent me the entire comprehensive season of the entire show, not to mention the OVAs, which came right after, which are a great companion piece to the overall series. And it also came with a lot of other really good goodies like art books and this really cool wall scroll that you currently see right behind me. But the fact of the matter is, Brandon, thank you so much for sending all of this stuff. It really made digesting the series really easy, and I have to say it got me really hyped for the show, which initially, I have to say, of the first 2 episodes, I really wasn't digging all that much. But then when I took a deeper dive into what Captain Tylor really was, I found myself falling in love with this show. This is one of the greatest sci-fi space opera comedies that I have ever seen. It truly grew on me like a fungus, so let's go ahead and take a deep dive into the irresponsible Captain Tylor. So as I said before, I know a thing or two about a good sci-fi comedy. I know when there's going to be a good one, and I know when there's going to be a bad one.
Oh, this sucks on so many levels!
And after watching so many sci-fi and space opera comedies, I think I know what makes one good and what makes one bad. And this is kind of a fine line here. Whenever there's something that's like a straight parody of an actual franchise or like a typical genre, sometimes it can succeed. But whenever it's a comedy which is already set in a pre-existing universe, it can flop pretty hard. I'm looking at you, Star Trek's Lower Decks.
You suck!
However, I think when a series, a movie, a book, a comic book, an anime series is able to carve out its very own identity, its world that the characters can live in and they can manage to make it funny all at the same time, I think it manages to succeed in a number of ways. What's really great about the irresponsible Captain Tylor is that it does carve out its own identity while at the same time paying homage to everything that came before. But what is the entire series all about? Well, let's go ahead and dive right in. First off, the irresponsible Captain Tylor is actually based on a series of light novels, which were done by Hitoshi Yoshioka. The original light novel series had the title of the most irresponsible man in space, otherwise known as Uchu Ichi no Musukinen Otoko. But at the very beginning of 1993, a brand new anime series was greenlit, and it was produced by some of Japan's most amazing studios like Tatsunoko Productions, King Records, and VAP. The entire series consists of 26 separate episodes, and there's also this OVA series, which are basically side stories, and they focus on a lot of the other side characters of the series, all of which are immensely entertaining. But what about the titular Captain Tylor himself? The series itself is set in a highly advanced future where we're immediately introduced to Justy Ueki Tylor, a young man who seems to have no purpose in life other than to just be as lazy as possible and coast right through it. So, being who he is, he decides the best course of action is to join the military.
Wow! You're an idiot!
So while this might seem like a really bad idea, it actually ends up working in Tylor's favor because as stupid as he is, as unexperienced as he is, as the title would imply, as irresponsible as he seems to have the special ability to get out of any situation, life, death, or otherwise. Through a series of ridiculous events, which believe it or not include making a computer orgasm, somehow Tylor makes his way into the military, which is known as the United Planet Space Force, or the UPSF for short. He does all of this by somehow succeeding in stopping a terrorist situation, and this ends up getting the attention of the United Planet Space Force higher-ups, and they decide to make him the captain of the Soyokaze, which is essentially the shittiest ship in the military. This is where the riffraffs go, the forgottens, the ones that no one care about. And honestly, it seems like the perfect place for Tylor to go, because if they wanted to get rid of a lot of these soldiers, well, this is probably the best way to do it, as Tylor has zero experience in being in the military and much less being a captain. A lot of the humor in the show comes from the fact that he's interacting with all of these people who've been in the military for a very long time, and they've never had to be with someone who is so, well, inexperienced at their job. And what's really great about Tylor is that he completely disregards any sort of regulation in terms of what the military uses or tries to do. Basically, he just says, everybody can kind of do what they want. By some divine miracle, Tylor is somehow able to bring the crew of this ship together, and he ends up making them a massive force for the UPSF. You see, Tylor couldn't have joined the military at a worse time, because currently they're at war with an alien race which is known as the Raogon, and the Raogon themselves are in many ways the complete opposite of the UPSF. They're ruthless, they're calculating, and they also have a remarkably interesting culture. I especially love the clash in design between these two organizations, where the UPSF is very classic Star Wars and Star Trek, whereas the Raogon seem to have this sort of like pseudo-organic technology where all of their ships seem like they are made out of an organic material. This combined with their overall elf-like appearance truly does make them feel alien, and this combined with their overall culture makes them a really nice opponent for Tylor and all of his crew. So ultimately, the entire series is basically about a ragtag group of young soldiers who are going up against an insurmountable alien force. But really, that's not what the entire series is all about. The series is about the characters, Captain Tylor and all of his subordinates, and they truly are what make this a hilarious show. As I've said before, Tylor is a character who doesn't quite know what he's doing, but that never actually manages to diminish his overall happiness of finally finding a career where he can be in charge and pretty much do nothing. He pretty much puts all of the work on his crew the entire time, but also manages to actually bring out their best qualities, which I think is actually kind of funny. But of course, the biggest thing about Tylor that I mentioned before is that he has the devil's own luck. No matter what situation this guy gets himself into, he always manages to get himself out of it and practically unscathed the entire time. Whether it's his actual higher-ups trying to assassinate him, constantly being assaulted by the Raogon Empire, or just all of the dangerous interactions that he has with all of the women on the ship because, of course, he's a big horny idiot, he manages to pretty much get out of everything. He's entirely too laid back, he's incredibly irresponsible, he has zero experience with anything, and yet by the end of the series, he manages to change the very face of this confrontation between the UPSF and the Raogon. But again, like I said, it's those other characters that sort of support him and make the series what it is. In fact, I think one of the funniest characters of the entire series is not even Captain Tylor itself, it's probably his greatest opposing force, Lieutenant Yamamoto. If Captain Tylor is Lupin III, then Lieutenant Yamamoto is easily Detective Zenigata. There's an odd couple vibe between these two characters, and I absolutely love it the entire time, with Lieutenant Yamamoto basically being a very by-the-book lieutenant in the UPSF, and he has these great dreams of being like a great commander of a ship, so you can imagine his disappointment when he finally goes to the Soyokaze and learns that it's going to be run by what is effectively an absolute shithead moron. The interactions between these two characters is nothing short of hilarious, as Yamamoto is constantly freaking out over the fact that Tylor is either going to completely have the crew destroy each other from the inside, or he's going to somehow lead them into a Raogon fleet which is going to blast them. And most hilariously of all, he constantly questions himself throughout the series, asking himself, is Tylor actually really experienced, or is he just a fucking moron? Of course, Lieutenant Yamamoto is backed up by a number of other characters in the series who all have a completely different experience with Tylor, but they're all just as interesting. Just like Lieutenant Yamamoto, there is also Major Yuriko Star, who very much like him is very straight-laced and by the book. She is definitely there to do her job to the best of her abilities and to try to keep everyone in line. She also feels that she has some sort of a responsibility for Tylor, especially because she was directly involved in that terrorist incident, which allowed him to join the military in the first place. But again, what I love about the interaction between these two characters is that unlike a lot of the other ones, Yuriko does not take Tylor's shit, and she calls him out at pretty much every single opportunity. Yet she never manages to be all that annoying. She's sort of, again, the straight woman to Tylor's ridiculous antics. But every giant space warship needs a crew, and this one certainly has a memorable bunch. On the bridge of the ship, you have Kim and Katori, who are basically the most normal characters in the series. They put up with a lot of Captain Tylor's shit, but again, they sort of act as the yin to his yang. There's also Nurse Petty Officer Harumi, who ends up being the doctor's assistant, and I don't want to give away a big twist about her character, but she's not exactly who she says she is. But again, she's another one of those characters who you would think would get really annoyed with Tylor's antics, but in many ways, like a lot of the other female characters in the series, outside of Yuriko Star, she pretty much ends up falling for him. Oh, and did I mention Doctor? This series has an amazing doctor in the series. This guy who's completely responsible for taking care of everyone on the crew, and it just so happens that he's an extreme drunk and alcoholic. There's also the Space Marines, which are led by this guy named Anderson and Major Sergeant Cryborn. These guys are big, gruff, and crazy, and they always seem to get at odds with Captain Tylor at the beginning of the series, even almost straight up mutinying the entire ship, but eventually they do warm up to him as well, and they actually end up being pretty useful as the series goes on. You're not really going to see any like big massive battles from them or anything, but there's certainly the muscle that backs up the entire Soyokaze crew. I think one of the more underutilized characters is Kojiro, who is the, as they say, star pilot of the entire ship. The problem is he seems to have a problem with women. He can't seem to interact with them at all, freezing up around them at pretty much all turns, and this pretty much makes him practically useless as most of the crew is indeed women. Joining Tylor on the ship when he actually becomes captain for the first time is Emi and Yumi Hanner. They're two twin daughters who've decided to join him on his mission, and they were actually the granddaughters of the man that he saved in that terrorist threat. They are basically there just for fan service and laughs, and I'm not really going to complain.
Twins, Basil, twins.
But every heroic group is going to need some villains, and that's where the Raogon Empire come in. And like I said, they're remarkably interesting in terms of what their culture looks like, but there's two characters here that really are the standouts. There's the actual princess and leader of the Raogon Empire, Azaleen, and then of course, there is her #1 subordinate, Dom, who at first seems like he's going to be the main antagonistic threat of the series, and just like everybody else in the series, he pretty much believes that Tylor is either an amazing tactical genius, or he's just completely freaking lucky, and even by the end of the series, he doesn't even really know which one it is. Azaleen, however, is definitely the most interesting member of the Raogon, as she's only 16 years old and she's been forced into becoming the leader of the entire Holy Raogon Empire. What's really interesting about her character is that her childhood was basically stolen away from her, so she's desperately trying to reclaim it in any way possible, but making sure that no one can see it in the process. And about halfway through the series, she actually makes her first encounter with Captain Tylor, which, hilariously enough, of course, she ends up falling in love with. And that pretty much at the end of the day is the entire premise of Captain Tylor. Just Ueki Tylor leading the Soyokaze and his crew on a massive adventure through space where they can hopefully avoid the Raogon Empire, but they always manage to run into them at the same time. And it always ends up turning into these massive giant space battles where Tylor either comes up with a plan which makes no sense, or he straight up just decides to surrender to the enemy, and somehow, some way, it always ends up in their favor. If they don't end up escaping from the Raogon, they end up destroying them in the most ridiculous way possible. And again, it makes you question, is this really a part of his plan? No, the short answer is he's an idiot. One thing I do want to praise the series for is that the production value is surprisingly good. Now, of course, you have to take in mind this is an older anime series from the early 90s, but it manages to look really good. I in particular love the character design, especially the crew of the Soyokaze, as again, every single character is incredibly distinctive and unique. Whenever someone appears on screen, you know exactly who they are the entire time. The overall space battles themselves and the spectacle of them are also really well done with a lot of really good animation and gusto. The Raogon Empire are a very striking force. Their overall design of their ships and their people and the costumes that they wear are really freaking great. Azaleen and Dom in particular are really striking looking characters, and seeing them up against these somewhat normal looking humans is always something that's really great to see. It's also great to see sort of that culture clash between these two different organizations. And I'd also be remiss if I didn't mention the amazing music of the show, which not only has its original own OST, but the series also manages to enhance a number of its scenes by bringing in classic instrumental pieces. But first and foremost, Captain Tylor is a comedy series. It's a parody of space opera, and again, I think one of the strongest things about it is that it does so with its very own identity. It doesn't necessarily say, hey, here's something from Star Trek, let's make fun of it. Hey, you remember that thing from Star Wars? Let's throw it under the bus. It manages to do its own things with its characters, and it's those characters themselves which make this an incredibly strong experience. If you are even slightly into sci-fi, you need to check out Captain Tylor. It's surprisingly good at what it's actually trying to do, and you gotta get past the first couple of episodes, I think, to truly appreciate what it's going to be all about, as the first couple of episodes are basically just establishing what the premise is going to be, but they do a great job of introducing you to the character of Tylor, who honestly doesn't get that much characterization throughout the entire show, but manages to be one of the funniest characters that I have ever seen, and it's all due to his ridiculous and aloof personality to go into just about any situation, keep his cool, be calm, and just sort of go with the flow. Again, you gotta question, is this really all a part of his plan, or is he really just this stupid? It's hard to say. What is not stupid, however, is the irresponsible Captain Tylor. I honestly do see it as sort of an anime classic, one of course that I've never seen before until now, but I'm kind of sad that I never really had an opportunity to know anything about it until this point. The good thing is, Brandon, you decided to give me this entire series, and it's nothing short of amazing. This has been probably, I think, maybe my favorite Patreon review thus far. And a lot of the things I love about my Patreon reviews is it's a bunch of anime that I would otherwise never watch before, and 99% of the time, it's always surprising and something that I end up liking. But you made me a fan of this franchise, and that's something that I really want to thank you for. It's got me really excited to learn a little bit more about the franchise itself, dive a little bit deeper into the OVAs, and also to see if there could be something of a small future for this franchise. I don't know if it really even needs to happen. The good news is everything that is here is still pretty classic. It might be kind of retro, it might be kind of old school, but it's definitely worth your time if you're looking for a well-crafted series set in a well-thought-out sci-fi setting with amazing funny characters, perfect comedic timing, really great music, and a fantastic story which is told perfectly over the course of 26 episodes. It doesn't need to be any longer than that. It's perfectly condensed into everything here, and it just plain works. This is definitely a surprising series that anybody who's a fan of animation needs to check out. But there are certainly some speed bumps along the way. Like I said, the first couple of episodes didn't quite do it for me, but I bet if I went back and rewatched it from the very beginning all the way through, I'd probably appreciate it a lot more for what it actually tries to do the entire time. The good news is, its overall premise surprisingly never gets old. You would think a series about a guy who's just completely idiotic in terms of running a crew would get really boring just a couple of episodes in, but they always managed to make it interesting. So there it is, my friends. Thank you for watching my Patreon review on the Irresponsible Captain Tylor. I really loved this show, and of course I would really love to get your thoughts on it as well. If any of you had an opportunity to watch the original series, the OVA, or any of the material from the show at all, I'd love to hear about it in the comment section below. Let's have a big discussion all about it, your favorite characters, moments, and just general thoughts about the Irresponsible Captain Tylor. So there it is, my friends. Thank you so much for watching this review. I'll see you all next time, and as always, stay down there, baby.